Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing as well as analysing the second generation of RDNA. If you've been following along with the channel for the last week or so, you'll know that I've had several pretty big exclusives concerning AMD's next generation GPU. So in today's video, I wanted to put some of these rumours that I've been hearing, some of this information all together, and furthermore, I figured that I'd throw in some extra information too. So let's start things out with the CPUs actually, not the GPUs. And that is, of course, the Zen 3 series from AMD. And I'm hearing that these CPUs will be profoundly powerful. In a recent video, I mentioned that AMD is believing internally, and this is a pretty verbatim quote, that the Zen 3 Ryzen 5000 series, and yes, it seems like AMD will be calling these the Ryzen 5000. Not only did I leak this, but also then Patrick Scher over on Twitter seemed to confirm this. But getting back to the topic in terms of performance, I was told that AMD internally are joking that the performance of the Zen 3 cores for gaming, and this is key, it's gaming we're talking about here, will, quote, make Intel want to pop pain pills. Ouch indeed. Or maybe not ouch if they take enough pain pills. That's very boastful talk, and so I started to do some digging as to the reasons behind this, and apparently it seems to be to do with how the processors have changed architecturally with things we do know about. So, for example, the changes on the unified CCXs that we've discussed like 2 trillion times by now, the higher clock frequency, which is not directly related to IPC, but obviously faster clock frequencies do increase cache speed and all that jazz. But I'm also hearing it seems to be something to do with either branch prediction or prefetching on the chips. I'm asked to not go super into detail about this, unfortunately, but long story short, it seems that the improvements for Zen 3 are quite tangible in this area, and this combined with the other improvements that AMD have made with the next generation architecture, such as, again, the unified CCXs, which I do think is going to scale very well with games, means that AMD have a great shot to be able to compete with Intel's Comet Lake architecture, so that would be the 10900K and other CPUs. But interestingly too, it was pretty common consensus that for gaming, which doesn't necessarily take thousands of threads into account, maybe Rocket Lake from Intel, which is not based on the Skylake architecture, could outperform Zen 3. Now, what's interesting now is that a couple of my sources are not so certain. From what they're hearing from AMD's own kind of whispers, it might be that even Rocket Lake is not enough to take the performance crown away from AMD for gaming. I'll stress, I'm not so certain about this information as some of the other things that I've mentioned, but it seems that even Rocket Lake may not be enough. And this would be a very interesting scenario, I'm sure you can agree, because, well, gaming is like the bastion of Intel. I'm sure that certain applications probably will favour Intel. I'm sure it won't be a clean sweep. There might be a game like CSGO, for example, where Intel does retain the crown. But overall, it seems that even Rocket Lake may actually wrestle the gaming crown away from Intel. It's like, it could be super weird as well, because think of it this way. If the performance is so intangible, it doesn't matter. Especially as higher resolutions come into play, for example 1440 or 4K. If the performance is so little different between, let's say, Rocket Lake and Zen 3, I can see a lot of folks just deciding to stick with Zen 3, honestly. And it's quite interesting because this seems to also be coinciding with what we're learning that AMD are also planning to release a 10-core SKU. We know so far an 8, a 10, and a 12-core SKU have leaked. I'm pretty sure as well there is a 16-core SKU. I was told that this was planned, unless AMD have decided not to do that, which would be really weird. The only reason I can think that they wouldn't would be to save the HEDT lineup. But again, given what they've done with the Zen 2 architecture, I think that they will release a 16-core Zen 3. I think it will probably be later. They did that with the Zen 2 lineup, Ryzen 3000, so I suspect that they'll probably do much the same here. Hey all, it's Paul from the future. After I finished filming the on-camera segments of this video, well, actually 24 hours later, I was sent a whole bunch of information from a source who's been ultra-reliable in the past, and they actually provide a lot of clarification as to the performance claims for Zen 3. This predominantly seems to revolve around Milan, but I imagine a lot of this can translate rather well to client, aka the desktop side of things. I'll start things out with the things that we already know officially from AMD, either through, deliberate means or oops, we accidentally released a video that we shouldn't have and made it public. I still believe that that was purposeful. But anyway, we have 64 cores, 2 threads per core for the highest end Milan product. Just as a quick reminder, the Rome platform can basically host Milan. You will probably need to perform a BIOS update, but ultimately it's basically just drop-in, for lack of a better term. And as we know again from that same video that AMD released, there's 32 megabytes of level 3 cache, which is shared now for the entire CCX/CCD, whatever you want to say. We've discussed that umpteen and one time, so I don't want to go super into that again and again. But going further, I believe it was Jim over at Adore TV who first mentioned it in a video, because he was DMing me about it, that the performance for Zen 3 was quite higher than Zen 2. And he was leaking that it was 15% integer performance. Now, I had previously released a video to him that it was allegedly 10 to 15% integer performance for Zen 3, but one of the things I did get wrong is I was told that the focus was on floating point FP performance for Zen 3, but that apparently isn't the case. Now, I don't know whether that's for a future Zen architecture or whether my source was just wrong, because they seem to be right on a lot of the other aspects of this. But either way, the floating point performance is not mentioned in this new information that I was given. It seems to back up the 15% integer performance, but it could be higher in reality, and AMD apparently are targeting single core performance with Zen 3. And one of the tests they're using, I'm told anyway, is SpecViewPerf's 2017 integer testing, CPU 2017 integer testing, and allegedly, compared to Zen 2, we are looking at a sizable jump, a 15% plus IPC gain for integer workloads, which I'm sure you'll agree is pretty damn impressive. AMD also, of course, have the benefit now of the 32 megabytes of level 3 cache being unified across all of those cores, which should work very well with the cloud and like large, compute-based workloads. But I also suspect that it's going to do extremely well for games. Just mostly because obviously you won't have such a latency associated with, intercore communication. I'm going to be super interested to see how all of this scales, especially given clock frequencies. Now let's move over to the GPU information. You'll know that I probably know anyway that I've leaked a whole bunch of images for the RX 6900 XT, and I've also leaked a render 2 of the 6700. You will notice it's a dual fan design, which is obviously, well, one less than the triple fan design of the 6900 XT. What's interesting though is there's still two 8-pin power connectors that demand your attention for the 6700. Now this may change because it is, at the end of the day, just a render, but it's the performance of the 6000 series which seems to be getting a lot of folks' attention. And again, I'm hearing very, very confident wording from people who are familiar with the cards. As a quick reminder, it seems like the GPUs only have a 256-bit bus and based on GDDR6 architecture. But what's quite interesting about this is that the cache structure, which AMD seems to be referring to internally as the Infinity Cache, makes up for this. Indeed, I was talking to another person and they said to me that they believe that the Infinity Cache, which is said to be up to 128 megabytes for the 6900 XT, is about on par with a 384-bit bus with Nvidia. And someone else seemed to confirm that this is the case. Now, interestingly, the person who confirmed that this was the case to me, I was talking to them quite a while ago, and they told me that RDNA 2's architecture is very power efficient, which has turned out to be the case, and we'll get more into the power in just a moment. And they also told me that it's extremely scalable. So while Nvidia's strategy of RT cores and tensor cores definitely has benefits, the ones we've discussed a trillion times by now, so I won't retread in this video, the benefit of AMD's strategy, I was told, is it's extremely scalable. And this seems to be AMD's strategy with RDNA 2 in a nutshell. Scalability. Basically, the cache means that it's easier to scale on different solutions, and also cheaper too. Once again, judging from the information I'm getting, RDNA 2 with the large cache seems to be cheaper to manufacture than a GPU which has a wider bus. And again, just to remind you, we're looking at 16 gigabytes for the highest end SKU. This is less than the rumoured 3080's 20 gigabytes, but honestly, 16 gigabytes, I don't think we're going to get a problem. Rogame also recently leaked that he thinks that Navi 21 is 16 gigs and 22 is 12. To my knowledge, this seems to be the case. I'm hearing that the 6700 XT is 12 gigabytes. We can presume, therefore, that the bus would only be 192, and I also think that the Infinity Cache 2 would see a cut, but I'm not certain about that part, so take that for what it is. Now, the performance is said to be absolutely monstrous for these GPUs. Again, I was the first to leak of the Nvidia killer. And there was a point where I was starting to think, maybe AMD did not know about the performance of Ampere. And again, Ampere is a monster. But I think AMD have a very good architecture on their hands. It seems that we are looking at a up to 50% performance per watt improvement per CU. I want to stress that. Per CU, and the reason, of course, that's imperative is because AMD are cranking more CU onto the same die. So you can't have this situation where the performance per watt does not improve and then double the number of CU or whatever, depending on the configuration of the GPU. So again, it seems like the performance per watt is 50% or greater. In fact, speaking to someone else, they told me that it's not 50%, which was AMD's target, it's actually 60%. That's very, very impressive if it's true, and it would be very interesting because it also matches something else. I'm hearing from two people now that the clock frequency of these GPUs is fast. Many times I've said that I think we're looking at around 2 gigahertz, maybe a little faster, but I don't think it's going to be slower than 2 gigahertz. I'm actually hearing that it could be, in some cases, up to 30% faster than the RDNA 1 architecture, which would be ridiculous if that's true. The thing is, what I can't figure out though is if this is in relation to game clock frequency or boost frequency, because I've got to tell you, if this is boost frequency, that clock frequency is way higher than what I anticipated, and it actually goes against something else I was told, that RDNA 2 doesn't go much above the PS5 clock frequency. I was told around 2300 looked like it was going to be about the limit because of intra-CU bus limitations. Maybe it's possible that this was because it was early engineering samples, and AMD have since gotten past that and higher. Maybe my information was old there, or maybe the clock frequency of 30% greater could be wrong. It's also possible that we're looking at some type of shifting technology, because I learned about the PS5, and I'm not 100% about this, but one thing that I did learn about the PS5 from a couple of people now is that it seems that it's not just like the GPU boosts at a certain frequency, it seems to be almost CU dependent, which can go up and down. So I wonder if similar things can be employed with the second generation of RDNA's architecture. It's not exactly smart shift, but smart bar. Now I don't know if this is true, because the technology is kind of, well, interesting to put it mildly. But allegedly it's kind of similar in spirit to smart shift. Obviously, smart shift is CPU, GPU, but with this, it seems more like memory/GPU, and depending on what's going on, the clock frequency adjusts itself. If you put all of this stuff together, it would make sense, because high clock frequencies obviously benefit the cache of a GPU, which we can assume the infinity cache would scale with clock frequency. I'm going to be curious if all of that is true, because if so, it's definitely a very different strategy for designing a GPU to what we have currently. It would also possibly make sense based on what we're hearing about RDNA 3 and the fact that it's apparently chiplet based. If that's true, AMD's plans here to increase the cache sizes and all of this other stuff makes sense as groundwork for this future architecture. So, in terms of performance, again, I'm hearing that the 6800 card is what AMD seems to be pushing the heaviest internally, and it seems to believe that it will be competing very well against Nvidia's RTX 3080. I also decided to do some digging regarding feature sets, and I asked my source, what about upsampling as well as what type of performance for ray tracing? They simply said yes in regards to upsampling and ray tracing, which doesn't answer much, honestly. If I had to guess, it's being performed similar to the Xbox Series X, but how this works in reality, I don't honestly know. And again, that's assuming this information is accurate. I am doing my best, and one of these sources have given me a ton of this information, also provided me the not just the renders, but also the photos of the GPU. So you assume that they do have pretty good information, and they've had a very good track record in the past, and a couple of other people have also corroborated this information. So I think at least a good portion of what I'm reporting here is true. The question for me at this point is, how will we see the GPU market unfold, given I believe Nvidia will still have an advantage in hardware-based ray tracing? I assume they will continue to push DLSS. I still feel that DLSS probably is going to be better than AMD's technology, but I say that with a lot of ignorance. I'm basing this on, to be honest with you, incomplete information on AMD's strategy. But just logically, given Nvidia's push for machine learning, then again, it could be that Nvidia's strategy takes more work for developers and AMD's strategy works with all games. I'm not saying it does, I don't know, I'm just simply throwing it out there. I think AMD will try to undercut Nvidia. And this makes me wonder if AMD will face an RTX 3070 and 80, which perhaps also see a cut in price too. I'm not saying Nvidia will cut the price, I'm saying maybe they might consider it, especially when the 20GB cards come out. So for example, Nvidia could cut the price of the 10GB 3080 by, let's say, $50, and then slot in the 20GB card. Then again, you would assume the 20GB modules they would want to charge a premium for, so yeah. My personal opinion at this stage, should you buy a 30 series GPU? Yeah. I think that if you want to do an upgrade and you happen to see an RTX 30 series card on store shelves, do it if you like Nvidia's GPUs. If you don't really feel like you need to upgrade now, then by all means wait for AMD. If you feel that you want a card this second and the extra 6 weeks or whatever but end up waiting with the RX 6000 series is going to frustrate you, then maybe it's better just to jump on an Nvidia card right now. There is also some workloads which do better on Nvidia's GPU. With that said, I think AMD are going to have a very competitive card. I just don't think that they're going to beat Nvidia cleanly across the board. I think it's going to be a very interesting fight. And I think that people are going to this generation need to make decisions. I think it's going to be a case of, well, AMD are faster in this game and at this particular SKU, but Nvidia have, this lag reduction technology. Do I want that? Well, okay, that's a wash then. Well, Nvidia do have DLSS and slightly better ray tracing performance, but AMD, you get I'm not going to keep going with that, you get what I'm saying. So I think it's going to be these decisions which you have to make, rather than just it being a case of, oh, so you want the fastest card, eh? Well, RTX 2080 Ti it is. And I think that's good, honestly, from the perspective of customers, consumers, buyers, whatever you want to call yourselves. I'm hoping that AMD nail it. I'm really hoping, too, that there's not shortages of their GPUs, too, which would suck. I think AMD are going to be really bringing the pain for both Intel and Nvidia this generation. And I think Nvidia are going to be able to respond very well because of their software ecosystem, and also their architecture is still very powerful. It is power hungry, but it's also very powerful. And some games, I think will get wins on Nvidia. I think ultimately, though, this next couple of years in tech is going to be very interesting. While I am super hyped about Ampere, and I am super hyped about RDNA 2, I'm actually more interested, in a way, with Hopper, Intel XZ, and also RDNA 3 because of the chiplet nature of them. I think in terms of scalability, those GPUs have a ton of potential, but we'll discuss those in another video. With all of that said though, thank you very much for watching, take care of yourselves, bye for now.